We had some warm wishes from friends, my parents' friends in Chutz La'aretz who could not make it tonight. Some called, some wrote. One in particular, Rabbi Danny Melman, Morid Asher of Young Israel of Lido Beach, was an old childhood friend of my father's. His friendship my father held dear until the day he died. The feeling was very mutual, and I'd like to just read you what he wrote. I can't believe that my friend Jerry is no longer with us. I am sitting at my computer writing these words of Nechama, and so sorry that I can't be with you. I remember the words of the Rav when he spoke about Avraham Avinu and Eretz Yisrael. He said the closeness of man and Hashem is confined to a specific environment and conditioned by certain factors. The first appearance of Hashem to Avraham was when he said Lech Lecha, and instructing him to emigrate from his home to Eretz Yisrael. The Rav seemed to imply that a true intimate relationship between Hashem and Avraham could only take place in Eretz Yisrael, for this was the ideal place for the meeting of Hashem and man. I sense that the metaphysical qualities of the Eretz Yisrael endows man with a very special spiritual climate that cannot be found in any other place. The fact be told, it is written, Chayei neshamot avir artzecha. The air of Israel is the breath of life for our souls. Jerry always wanted to be Lech Lecha to Israel. This was his dream, even though unfortunately it was far too short a period of time. But deep down in my heart, I know that it was qualitatively the greatest and most cherished time in his life. And his neshama was enriched so much spiritually that Jerry became the person he always wanted to be and found that special self while living in Israel. With such an act on his part, I know that his neshama will always be a blessing to you and to all of us and to Klal Yisrael. No, my nechama is to the family, but also to my heartfelt nechama to my friend Jerry. Tehei neshamat tzrura b'tzror hachayim. The characteristic of caring so much about life in Eretz Yisrael, his activism, his agmat nefesh for what was going on in Klal Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and Medinat Yisrael at large. My father would try to rally the people of his community and surrounding neighborhoods, plead and urge people to take a stand for Israel, write letters to the government, be involved, and show support. Usually met with opposition and rationalizations for what was going on here in our homes, as they felt it should be. It caused my father tremendous aggravation and sadness. We often would schmooze about it. I joke around with Dad, and I nicknamed him Yirmiyahu. We all told him, Dad, you can only feel shalem if you get here already. So with stage 4 cancer, my father packed up with Mom and moved here, only getting 8 months here. But 8 months more than even Moshe Rabbeinu. Our keynote speaker for tonight's Erev Askara is Rabbanit Shani Taragin. Shani by no means needs an introduction, for she is so famous already. But for those of us who are new here, Shani Taragin completed a BA and MA in Tanakh and Talmud at Bar Ilan University. She is currently pursuing her PhD in Tanakh while serving as the Rosh Beit Midrash of Midrashet Lindenbaum. She also teaches collegiates and adults at Matan, Migdal Oz, Landers College, and the Women's Beit Midrash in Efrat and Ramat Shlomo. Shani is a graduate of Nishmat Keren Ariel program for certification as a halachic advisor in issues of family purity. She lectures throughout Israel and serves in the local religious council dealing with issues of Jewish law and education. Shani lives with her husband Ruvain and 6 children in Alon Shvat, Gush Etzion. But to our family, Shani has an even deeper familiar connection. We were raised in the same community. We grew up together, me a few years ahead. Our families were good friends. We davened together in the same shul. My sisters and I actually babysat for Shani and her 7 siblings. I was her youth leader, baking teacher, sometimes the davening group leader, and only to be rewarded later by having Shani as a mentor, teacher, and Torah leader. As I spoke to Shani of an appropriate topic, Shani put time and effort into connecting the Shiur appropriately for whom my dad was. We are very grateful, and her response for our advanced gratification to me was, thank you again for the zechut to sing Shirat Torah for such a hero. So I give you Shani Shirat Torah in memory of Dad.
Good evening, and indeed, Katonti Ha'erev Mikol HaChasadim. From not only the beautiful words of Phyllis, but as I welcome you all this evening, V'chvod HaAchsanya, to thank you, the entire Witkin Mishpacha, for embracing me and giving me this chut this evening, to speak L'Zachro U'Levarcho, in memory, indeed, of Rabbi Yerachmiel Ben Yamin, Jerry Witkin, and to thank you, the broader community of Hashmonaim, for the zchut to sing a little bit of Shirat HaGibor. Indeed, as Phyllis mentioned, when one makes a Siyum Hashas, as Avi did so beautifully, the words of the Mishnah and the letters of the Mishnah, the Mem and the Shin and the Nun and the Hey, are meant to serve also as an Aliyat Neshama. And we're all here this evening in order to promote and perpetuate the values, the Torah, and more than anything, the passion for Torah that was shared by Jerry Witkin. In addition, as Avi said, the Hadran, we say Hadar, we want to return. We want to return to that person, but at the same time, as we know, Chazal explained in Masachet Sukkot, Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, that the terminology of Hadar, Milashon pre-Eitz Hadar, also means beautiful. Hadran Alach. We turn to the Mishnayot and we say, may these words always be beautiful. No matter how many times we say them, no matter how many times we flick from one Mishnah to the next, Hadran Alach. May they be beautiful as the words, as the memories that we shall always indeed repeat with regard to those loved ones who have passed away. But Rav Avohu brings a very interesting explanation for Hadran. And he says beautifully, Hadran, why is the pre-Eitz Hadar called Hadar? Not just because of the beauty, but Hadar alav mishana l'shana. The etrog is always there upon its tree. The etrog is going to blossom and bloom throughout the entire year. And that's the Hadran. The Hadran we recite in memory of one to remember that they're always really with us. Hadar mishana l'shana. One yahrzeit may pass by and then another, and yet it still seems that Jerry is with us. It still seems that the lessons are with us. It seems as if his Torah, his teachings, his values, and his love will indeed pervade throughout our lives. And here, I definitely have the zchut to be able to not only share Torah with you this evening, but a little bit of my personal memories. As Marcia recounted earlier, and my mother, in fact, iterated this evening, as we moved into the community, the Witkins were not only a Hallmark family, but one with 6 children. And my mother always saying, I don't know how they do it. And look at this model couple, and she's always beautiful. And they have 6 children. So my mother decided she would try for that, and indeed did. I remember always thinking, the Witkins, they're the Brady Bunch. It's true, it's 4 girls and 2 boys. We're pretty close. And the perfect family. The family where the children not only come to shul with their father, but are going to end up teaching others. Lisa and Phyllis were my babysitters. And Jerry actually taught my brother Avi his Parshat HaShavua for his learning of the Torah for his bar mitzvah. And I remember more than any other parsha of my 5 brothers, I remember Parshat B'Shalach, not only because of Shirat Hayam, but because Jerry would tell my brother, you know what, Avi, sing it throughout the house. Sing the laning. Make the laning become part of you, because it's beautiful. This is Shirat HaTorah. And in fact, this brother of mine really did sing his parsha for numerous years, over and over again. In addition, Gana, for each one of the siblings, I believe, Gana, and not only, again, growing up with Lisa and with Phyllis, but also with Zahava as a friend in college and in Israel later on, and Zalman marrying a very close friend, marrying Stephanie, and certainly the community, Vicky coming from the same mishpacha as the Rav of the community, but feeling always that this family was a family that we, the entire community, embraced. I was thinking of a pasuk in the parsha that we can certainly connect to the values represented by Jerry Witkin, and I didn't have to look too far, as the second pasuk of the parsha tells us, Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yekchu li truma me'etz kol ish asher yidvenu libo tikchu et trumati. One should accept the trumot specifically from those asher yidvenu libo. And we know that by Parshat Ki Tisa, everyone is going to be required to offer a machatzit shekel. Everyone will have some opportunity to participate in the building of the Mishkan. And yet the initial commandment should come, mi'ish asher yidvenu libo, from those who initiate, from those who offer of themselves, of their own hearts. I can't think of any other or greater quality of Jerry Witkin than indeed that spirit of voluntarism, of initiating programs, of being involved not only in his children's chinuch, but in fact in the chinuch of every child in the community of Knesset Yisrael in Far Rockaway. I can't remember a single Shabbat when I didn't see his face and his bright red hair running throughout the shul, making sure that the programs were okay, making sure that every child was learning and was davening. And this, as Phyllis said beautifully, continues through the children and the grandchildren, but not only yours, but throughout those of the entire community. And therefore we begin this evening by trying to make sense of it all. And specifically on the eve of Rosh Chodesh, as I recall paying a Shiva call 2 years ago and thinking, this just isn't right. It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Adar. Mishenechnas Adar marbim b'simcha. How can someone who represented so much simcha be taken away at this time? And all I could do to comfort myself was to believe that the month itself was going to serve as compensation. That perhaps mishamayim, a little simcha is taken away in order to allow us to bring more simcha into our lives. And with this, we try to, together with the Nevi'im, and especially Yirmiyahu, understand and reinterpret messages of these months of Shvat and Adar, as we are now at the brink of the transition. So we begin with the month of Shvat, which we know really doesn't have an exact significance with regard to historical developments, and yet the Mishnah Masechet Rosh Hashanah opens by telling us Arba Rashi Shanahen, and one of them in fact is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, says Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel disagrees and says, no, the Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanot is Tetvav, is the 15th of Shvat. And if we look carefully at the list of the Rosh Hashanah, one has to argue in favor of Beit Shammai. After all, the Rosh Hashanah LeMelachim is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Le Rosh Hashanah LeMasrot Behema is Rosh Chodesh Elul, Rosh Hashanah LeBa'ei Olam for all of mankind is Rosh Chodesh, is the beginning of the month of Tishrei, and therefore, consistent with all heads of months, consistent with the beginnings, shouldn't Rosh Chodesh Le'ilanot, shouldn't the Rosh Hashanah for the trees also begin at the onset of the month? Perhaps what Beit Hillel is arguing is that all other Rosh Hashanah, all other beginnings really do begin at the onset of the lunar calendar. But the 15th of every month represents something else. The 15th of every month, if we look through the lunar calendar, starting with Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 15th of Nisan is the hallmark holiday of Am Yisrael, is Pesach. The 15th of Tishrei is going to be the end of not just the agricultural season, but another historical holiday that reminds us of Yetziat Mitzrayim and how Hashem protected us as we were in the Midbar. The 15th then, perhaps Beit Hillel is claiming, represents some type of historical development. A historical development that we may not think about at the beginning of the month when the moon is still somewhat hidden and new. But by the time we reach the middle of the month, by the time we see the climax of Shvat, that's when the moon is in full view, and that's when we can appreciate some level of historical development. And what is the development of Shvat? The Ilanot, beginning to see the blossoming of the trees, heralded by which of the trees? I was waiting for everyone to say the Shkeidia, for in fact, again, we sing this. This is our song for Shvat, HaShkeidia Porachat. In Tanakh, however, the term Shkeidia never appears because it's just a modern terminology to rhyme within the song with Hashemesh Zorachat, so it has to be a Shkeidia Sheporachat. And yet in Tanakh, it's an 8 Shaked. So perhaps if we can understand the significance of the Shaked in Tanakh, maybe then we can appreciate, as Beit Hillel wants us to, what the significance, the historical significance of the Shaked is that we're supposed to be focusing on in the month of Shvat. So we begin with the most obvious reference that we already associate with Jerry Witkin, Yirmiyahu. Poor Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu, who's going to be on the scene prior to the Churban Beit HaMikdash. Yirmiyahu, who's going to have to berate his people for the various iniquities that they've been performing. Yirmiyahu, who has to convince his entire community of the inevitable punishment that they don't even believe to be somewhat conceivable. Divrei Yirmiyahu ben Chilkiyahu min HaKohanim, Asher banotot be'eretz Binyamin. Already a connection there. Asher hayad v'Hashem ela b'mei Yoshiyahu ben Amon melech Yehuda b'shlosh shana l'malcho. He'll begin to prophesy in the 13th year of Yoshiyahu, which means that knowing Yoshiyahu rules for 40 years altogether, for 31 years, meaning another 18 years during the reign of Yoshiyahu, followed by serving as a prophet for 11 years under Yehoiakim, and his last 11 years leading to the Churban Beit HaMikdash under Tzidkiyahu. For those subconsciously performing the calculation in their mind,